Welcome, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Locke, and I welcome you one more time to my summit titled Hopeless to Happy. And my guest today is Michelle Anhang. She is a certified leadership and life coach, and she helps people, her families, working through mental health issues and recovering from loss. And so I wanted to say thank you, Michelle, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. So I am curious. We kind of talked before. You mentioned, you had a very traumatic experience, several years ago. Can you kind of share what happened that kind of triggered, this life switch that you made to it?
Sure. Yeah. So a little over 14 years ago, I lost my husband by suicide. He had been suffering from severe mental illness. He had bipolar disorder and a form of schizophrenia. So that piece was traumatic on its own. And then to add to it, as the family was gathering, just hearing the news, somebody had turned to me and said, "What are we going to tell people?" And, my initial reaction was like, "Oh, I don't know." And then of course well, not of course, but this is what I did. My process was I went to the space of, um, you know, what could I have done differently? How might have been my fault? Did I miss something? Did I not see something? We had two small children at the time. Our boys were 7 and 4. How am I going to tell them about this? We hadn't talked about the mental illness because of the shame and the stigma and all of that. So now how do we suddenly talk about it? Suicide? So I thought, yeah, the best thing to do is let's say it's an accident. And I told that lie for over 10 years. I kept the truth a secret for that long. So that was pretty hard. It was pretty, it took a huge toll on my mental health, my physical health, pretty much every aspect of my life. I was living a lie. And, I like to think of myself as an honest person, but then, it's this dissonance of like, how can I call myself an honest person when I'm carrying this around? And so I really was like, I put this wall around myself and I was not letting people in. I wasn't letting people close to me because I didn't want to have to go there. I didn't want to have to touch that. And so it was a pretty painful, 10, 11 years there where I was really, tiptoeing around, living, with anxiety of what if people find out the truth? What if my kids find out from somebody accidentally? Depression, because I took all the emotions and just shoved them down and didn't grieve a suicide. I was pretending to grieve an accident, which is very different from grieving a suicide. There, a lot of different emotions that go with both. So it really, I was basically just, kind of shrinking as much as I possibly could from this space of, carrying this huge secret that I was telling myself was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I'm curious because you say the suicide, who was it that was telling you that what are we going to say?
So I don't want to call anybody out. It was a family member who also had their own shame. And so, and I know they were not coming from a bad place. They were just coming from a place of fear. So I don't name who they are, but yeah, it was something, it was the immediate family and everybody went along with it. And that was the piece of it too, that, as the extended family is coming and gathering and, close friends, and we're saying, okay, this is what we're saying, everybody's nodding their head going, oh, of course. Yeah.
Right.
Because that's just what we did. We just, everything, gets swept under the rug. You put on the smile, the face, and the mask. And, this kind of thing doesn't happen in our family.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think we were all part of it. It was an agreement everybody made.
Okay. Yeah. And not that I was wanting you to
Yeah.
name names or anything,
No,
but
I
just,
know.
for the sake of the audience, because
Yeah.
people who go through this kind of thing, may be able to resonate with, what you went
Yeah.
through. And do you happen to have an opinion or a reason, do you think, why there's so much shame and um, surrounding suicide? Because I've noticed in too, where I've known people who have died, and you kind of already know that it's suicide because there's no mentioning of the reason, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I know that it's a very, very well, I'll use the word complex kind of situation, because everybody's pain is different.
Yeah.
um, but why so much shame regarding our pain?
Yeah. And I feel like it stems from this cultural idea of, where we glorify stress, we glorify busy, we glorify, turning off your emotions and just plowing through. And like, I even remember after my husband passed away, if I was like just being out in the grocery store doing my thing, and like, I'm still grieving, but oh, you look so good, you're so strong. Like, being strong is glorified. Crying and falling to pieces is not. And tying it into mental health, um, you know, mental illness is viewed as a weakness, sadly. Like, some people see it as a character flaw. Because then suddenly it's like, okay, I'm not functioning in busy. I'm not, there are days when I need to just be in bed. I can't even get up and take a shower. So it's not in line with what our culture seems to value. And then suicide is the next step from that, sadly, often, and no, too often. But it's just one more piece of it, of just like, oh, they were selfish, or there's so much judgment that comes around the person. And that was something that I went through as well. Like, I remembered having a friend who used to refer to this woman as the woman whose husband committed suicide. That's how they referred to this woman. And it was like, wow, you are defining this woman by the last moment of her husband's life. And it just didn't seem fair. Like, we don't talk about the cause of death with the majority of other, it's like, oh, that woman lost her husband. But when it's suicide, somehow there's something, dark about it. And so I feel like that it's that whole culture around that. And the guilt as well of, like I was saying, the thoughts I had around, um, you know, could I have done anything differently? Like, was I managing his pills well? Did I take him for all the treatments he needed? Could I have loved him more? Because I think that's a piece of it too, that often when we have family members with mental illness, because it's not, we can't see it, and it's not something you can go for like direct treatment, like radiation or something. We somehow feel like, it affects the mood. And so we somehow feel that, like, well, if we love them more and we make them happy, we can make them better. And so we take this on ourselves when, if a suicide happens, where somehow we think we failed, and there's shame around that feeling. So many layers and so many reasons that we can go there.
Yeah. Do you um do you think too, like, I find in my own experience that, at least in the religious world, like, suicide is like one of the worst sins, ever that
Yes.
somebody can commit.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you experienced as well?
So I personally did not, because, being so close to my husband, I knew he didn't make that choice. He sadly was psychotic at that point. And I think people don't understand too, that when somebody reaches that level, it's not like me suddenly going, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to do this today. this is something that people think about, whether or not they talk about it. It's usually planned. They're in a very dark place, and it's not the first time that they're in that dark place. And so, and I feel like, you know, particularly with my husband, he was not himself at all. Like I had lost the husband that I knew maybe 2 years earlier, you know, and he was just getting worse. I didn't recognize him anymore. I mean, you know, physically the medications had, you know, done all sorts of things that he didn't even look the same anymore. And behaviorally, like, he was the sweetest, gentlest, kindest soul. And that's not who he was at the end. You know, he would have, you know, anger. That's, you know, a lot of that came out, and that I know was a side effect of some of the medication he was on. You know, frustration, dark places. He was hearing voices. Like, this wasn't a choice that the man I knew made. So I didn't go into that space, but I know people do, because people, you know, sadly, we don't talk enough about this. We're not sharing what goes on the inside. Like, you just hear the end result of this person died by suicide, but we never hear, like, what did the last 2-3 weeks, even month before they died look like? Like, we never get that window into their life to understand that. And so, you know, that's why I talk about it, because I really feel like the more people are educated and understand that, you know, the better able they are to see that, you know what, this is a serious illness. These are not choices. If anything, you know, if they're making a choice, it's really to make the pain go away. They don't want to die. And I know with my husband, he was hurting terribly. He was so confused. You know, he had told me, like, you know, he's trying to do the right things. He's wanting to get better, and he's hearing voices that are telling him to do things. Like he said, that they're telling me to do things that I know are hurting you, and I can't stop them. And so this poor man thought this is the best thing to do. You know, this was his only way out. So I can only feel compassion. You know, I can't look at him from this harsh place of, you know, that, you know, God is judging him and I should judge him. Like, I can't be there, not now.
Right, right. And I thank you for sharing that with us. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's been a while, but I just want to say, you know, I'm sorry that that did happen. And I can relate, though, to some of the things that your husband was going through. And anyone who's watching this summit, you know, visited the opt-in page, and I shared, you know, a little blurb about myself in the video. And, you know, I found myself at one point wanting the pain to go away as well. And it was very, very the darkest time of my life for me. And so, and I know that people had reached out because I had disconnected my Facebook account. And a couple of people had reached out to me during that time. And when they asked me how I was doing, I was honest with them. And then the reality and the truth of what came next was, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that, and never heard from them again.
Mm.
And so there's really a very strange energy or stigma around this topic of deep, dark depression and suicide. And I thought, you know, I thought by me actually being transparent and not putting on the mask and saying, oh, I'm okay, you know, I'm just a little, you know, down or whatever, I was honest.
Yeah.
And I got a response of nothing, you know, basically. There was no help. And so, and I know your husband's, you know, situation was different. You know, he's, like you said, he was on medications, you know, and whatnot. But I just want to, you know, put this out there that there is no shame and there's no guilt about feeling the way that you feel. And we all have our feelings and our emotions for reasons. They're trying to tell us something, right? But we need each other. We need people to help us get through those times. And, especially when we don't want to be there.
Yes.
And so your experience with that of having two children and then having to figure out how to do life now, right?
Yeah.
So how did you continue on after all of that?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for sharing, and I'm so sorry that was your experience. And I know from people that I've shared with as well, like, some people just can't deal with their own dark emotions. And I find those are the people who generally can't be with ours either and can't hold that space for us. And, I mean, it's unfortunate. And whenever I'm talking to people about it, I say, like, be discerning in who you talk to, because if we know people, like, find the ones that hopefully can talk about it. And we're not always in a space to do it, but if we do recognize early enough, be selective about who we talk to, because sometimes we feel worse. And I know I had that experience too, with my own pain, and even with what I was going through with my husband, of just, talking to the wrong people and then feeling worse about it and even more shame afterwards. And, there's always the right people are out there, and I find that, like, for anyone who might be listening, excuse me, if you're not in that dark space right now, start thinking about who those people are and make a list and have it handy. I mean, I have that in my notes in my phone of, who I know I can reach out to, because we forget when we're in those dark places, all those people. And so, yes, if somebody's reaching out to us, then we're like, we grab that lifeline, but they might not always be the right person. So, and I'll go back to answering your question now. So I didn't cope well at all. I shoved everything down. I didn't want to deal with it. I kind of, I was already in survival mode and autopilot, and so many women do this. This is just kind of how we're living, because there's so much going on. And, we're almost afraid to feel, because we think that, if I start feeling this and the emotions, like the dam opens, it's never going to stop. It's just going to the tears will keep flowing, and I can't do that right now. And that's how I lived. And so I wasn't, like, I focused on my kids. I was, I said, I have one chance to do things right for them, because statistically speaking, okay, now they've just lost their dad. There's mental illness in the family. They're being raised by a single mom. Like, you look at all these statistics and they're not great. So I was just like, okay, I have to do whatever I can in my power to make sure I set them on the right path. And so that was my focus. And, to my detriment, because I didn't take care of myself at all. I was kind of all over the place and really not fully, I wasn't grounded at all. I was really just, autopilot, not thinking. If something fun sounded, happened to show up, okay, let's do that, because then I don't have to feel it. That's going to take me further from my feelings. So it was really a lot of avoidance, and I had my own depressive episodes. Like, I know that the biggest one happened about 6 months after he passed. And I think that's when the shock wore off. And I spent a month in bed, and literally, like, took my kids to school in my pajamas, came home, got into bed 3:45, picked them up from school. We did, pizza or macaroni and cheese. And then we all went to bed early. And that period of time for me was one where I finally was able to realize a little bit of what my husband was experiencing. And I remember, like, looking at the ceiling and just, like, lying in bed saying, like, if this is a fraction of what you felt, I understand now why you did what you did. Because in the beginning I had a lot of anger. It was just like, how could you do this? Like, you've left me alone. Like, I still, even though he wasn't well, I was still thinking of him as my partner in life. And it was like, oh my gosh, now, I've got this huge mess I need to clean up, and this huge secret I'm keeping, and I've got to raise the kids on my own. And how could you do this to me? And so I was in that space very, very deeply in the beginning. And then from that moment of understanding and connecting with the pain a little bit, that's when I was slowly able to, open up and find compassion again for his situation.
Yeah. So now that you have moved past that very, very difficult part, I kind of see a correlation between the work that you do now,
Yes.
right? Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your experience with your husband. Is that really where it birthed out of, that you just didn't, like, you don't want any other family to have to experience the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny how it came about, because, I hit, a new low. I say I didn't just have one rock bottom. I had a whole bunch. It was kind of like bouncing up and down. And so, yeah, it was around my 45th birthday where I just woke up to realizing like how I was living my life. I had started the coaches training program at the urging of a friend of mine. And, the first course that I took at the end, one of the instructors in his inspirational parting words said, "Don't just tolerate life." And I just started crying so hard because I realized I was tolerating everything. I was in a relationship that was not good for me. I was in a job that, while it, I learned a lot and it paid the bills and it was secure, it wasn't what I really needed to be doing and wanted to be doing. Like I was working in finance, so I was sitting behind a computer just punching numbers all day, which, is really not why I'm here. So I woke up to that and I started to do some deep work. I was like, okay, I'm not, like, I'm 45 now. I'm not living the next half of my life in this much pain. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to do the work to heal. And so it was through that process that I was able to then get to the point where I could tell my children the truth, which thankfully they took very well. They understood the shame-driven background that I came from and that our families were in. So they said, we understand why you did what you did, but we wish we had known sooner. And I was like, well, I wish I had told you sooner. I didn't want to have to be telling them at 15 and 18 of like, hey, guess what? But it did then open up an entirely new and open relationship with them. And from that point, I came to the realization of, this is who I want to be helping. And one piece too was, after I told my kids, I was like, okay, well, now I need to just get it out there in the world. People need to know the truth. And so I actually posted it on Facebook, and because I was like, my husband died just before Facebook came out. And so, over the years, and we had grown up together. So I had hundreds of friends that had grown up with the two of us, or had been friends with the two of us as a couple. And I wanted everyone to know at once and to hear it from me. And so I put it out there, and the response I got, I was terrified, but I got so much love in return, and so many people saying me too, whether it was hiding a mental illness, hiding a suicide, hiding anything else that they were ashamed of, if it's any kind of mental health issue, their children not, following the path they thought they were going to, so they're lying about the lives their kids are, like, so many different things that people were hiding. And I realized, and they're saying to me, like, thank you for having the courage to do that. Like, it gives me hope. And it was like, oh my gosh, these are the people I want to work with. I want to help people, support them, help them strategize to, overcome whatever their shame is, overcome their fears of, what's everybody else going to think, because that's such a big fear that many of us carry. And to know that we can change things. Like, yes, I made this choice, and I made the choice daily for 11 years. And then I chose differently. And my life is so much better and so much more has opened up and I am so much healthier. And I want everybody to have that same experience of feeling free, of just like, this is who I am. Like, we all deserve that.
Yeah, beautiful. So you specifically work with families then? Do you work with individuals too, or is it
Yeah.
mostly a family circumstances?
So I work with both. With the families, um, what the work that I do is essentially what I wish I had had at that time when I was struggling. So helping the families. So there's a lot of strategy and tactical stuff that needs to be navigated through. So helping with that element and helping the family members, do what I call lovingly detaching from the illness, because sometimes that's the only lens we can now see our family member through. And again, as I mentioned about my story of thinking like, if I just love them more, or if I fix them, or if I could talk to them and they can see what they're doing, it's like, but they can't. And so helping people come to that realization of, this is who your family member is right now. As long as they're getting medical treatment, obviously if they're not, then we're taking a different path. But if they are getting medical treatment, saying like, let the professionals do their work. Your role is to love them as the family member that they are, that you loved before they got sick. And just love them, because they, so often, we'll give suggestions of just go for a walk. Come on, just go outside. It's good for you. And they get angry. And that's not what they want from us. They want us to, they want us to love them, and so just even teaching family members how to communicate with them, of like, oh, well, what do I do? Because they're venting to me all, they're telling me how they're feeling. And I'm like, so, and what I say, and I offer this to everybody else, like, when somebody's in that situation, rather than jumping to solutions, ask them, what do you need from me? Would you like me to just be, an empathetic ear? Or would you like me to help you find a solution? And 10 out of 10 times, they're going to know instantly. They're going to tell you what that answer is. And so teaching the family members how to listen, be there, and fill their own cup. It's so much about self-care, because, we can't give to our family members, any of our family members, when we're depleted. And so we need to take care of ourselves, fill our cup so it's overflowing. And it's from that overflow that we're helping our families. So that's a long summary of what I do with the families. And then with individuals, depending where they're at, I don't work with people who have severe mental illness, but if they're having some mental health challenges, they may or may not be on medication, but they have been checked out by a doctor. They're under some kind of care. I teach mindfulness and meditation techniques, a lot of different techniques and self-care tools that any individual can use to empower them and to, enhance their life, because essentially the medications only do so much. And I think there's this misconception that, oh, well, I'm on antidepressants, so why aren't they working? Or they should work, and that's it, then I'm fine. But it's not. It's an entire lifestyle. It's being healthy from the beginning to the end of your day. It's really about the healthy choices and learning the tools of, like for myself, when I notice I'm going into a depressive episode, for me, it starts showing up as my body being really tired. So I work with clients on creating that mind-body connection so that they can identify what their particular symptoms are. And then, for me, if I'm noticing like, oh, okay, I'm tired, then I can, from this place of choice, before I'm going too deep into it, I can say, okay, what do I need? Do I need to take a day off and just rest and watch Netflix? Or do I need to go for a walk? Do I need to have, start eating better? Do I need to reach out to somebody? But coming from this place before it goes into, before I go into the darkness. So, and anxiety as well. And it, even without having, a diagnosis, right now in particular, I'm very busy because, with the pandemic, there's so much fear. There is so much anxiety. People that were not experiencing mental health challenges before are now noticing, the isolation is making a lot of people depressed. So there are things that we can do to shift out of it, without just resorting to medication or at all, but I don't go into the choices. I feel that that's very individual. I know for myself at one point I did need medication to pick me up. And then because of my lifestyle choices, I was able to go off of it. And of course, with my doctor's approval and supervision. So I recommend that to everybody. But we're more than the diagnosis, and we're more than the medication. So it's really just about living our full lives.
Beautiful. So how can people find you? And yeah.
So you can find me easily on my website, which is michelleanhangcoaching.com. I'm also all over social media. So my Facebook page and my Instagram handle are both Michelle Anhang Coaching. I'm on LinkedIn, just Michelle Anhang. Those are the places I'm at. I was going to say I want to go on TikTok, but my kids won't let me. They tell me I'm too old.
Mine won't either.
Yeah. There you go. I'm like, it looks like fun. I want to do one of those mom videos. And they're like, no, you don't, please. They tolerate everything else I do, but not that. So.
Oh, great. So what is the offer that you have for the viewers of the summit?
So I am offering a mindfulness training for emotional resilience course coming up at the end of September. And I'm offering anybody who's part of the summit 50% off. And it's a 4-week course. It teaches, it's essentially mindfulness for mental health, for good mental health. And it teaches a lot of very easy to use, quick techniques to help pick us up, to help us be mindful, to bring us into the present moment. It's been very popular, particularly that during this time. I've actually had to run a couple of different courses at the same time because of the demand. So yeah, I'm taking a bit of a break now, but we'll be bringing it back at the end of September. And there are more details on my website, and I will be running it through consecutively after that.
Awesome. Well, I encourage all the viewers to take advantage of it. Sounds like a really great course. And I just want to remind everybody that if you are feeling in this place, I know right now it's a very, very trying time. If you are feeling that you are in this dark place, there is no shame, there is no guilt, and you have resources. Michelle's one of them, and she can help you. And that there are ways to work around these dark, deep emotions. And so I just want to throw that encouragement out there.
Yes.
And again, I want to thank you again, Michelle, for joining me today. And thank you for sharing. It's a difficult story. I know you've worked through it. You're well on the other side and helping other people. And that's a great and beautiful thing. But I do thank you for sharing, that part of your story with us. So, we can hopefully help some others that are,
yes,
going through difficult times too. So, thank you.
And thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.